Today, we become legends.
With the launch of the Season of Souls in 10.6, a lot has changed in terms of the item meta, and while things haven't fully settled down yet, I thought it would be worth making an updated top 3 items for every role you should be building right now. If you're looking to cop some cheap gems, you can grab them on sale over at my Nexus creator link and support the channel. That's nexus.gg/intersect3. But without further ado, let's get started. So first up, the role that probably benefited the most from the changes this patch, solo lane. First up, we have an obvious one if any of you have played matches on 10.6, and that's Pridwin. I think this item with its new glyphs is pretty much an auto build on the majority of solo laners that can freely cast their ult in fights. There are a handful of gods like Achilles, for example, who can't just free cast his ult whenever he likes to and gets less value from Pridwin, or Nike where the shield doesn't stack with her shield from her ultimate, but outside of a few edge cases, this item is insane on most solo laners right now with the new glyphs. Some are better with red Pridwin and others with blue Pridwin, but most solo laners right now can use this item extremely well. The only small issue is that it ties up 20% of your 30% CDR quota on a warrior, but build around that and this item will do work for you in 10.6 as a solo laner. Next up is an item that's been around for a while but hasn't seen much play, and that's Dawnbringer. I can't overstate how much of a buff this item got in 10.6. Its passive effect went from 5% movement speed and procs per enemy up to 5 stacks to 10% per enemy up to 3 stacks. Not only does this go from a maximum of 25% to 30%, but you now only need to be near 3 enemies instead of all 5 to get that max benefit. This is infinitely easier to achieve. Simply diving the backline into the enemy mid, ADC and support will cap out this effect and give you a massive 30% protections and movement speed boost to run it down, which by the way, the protections boost can bypass the cap. This item is insane right now and I'm not seeing it picked up as much as it should be. I think it even has some potential on bruiser junglers or even some aggressive supports, but it's best used on solo laners, so it's in this section for the video. And finally for solo, an old but gold, it's Glad Shield. Yeah, this item is still really good on any solo laner that can proc its effect somewhat consistently. Any god with 3 damaging basic abilities will do well with this, but of course it's best abused on gods with more than 4 abilities like Arthur, Artio or Cuchulainn. It's not exclusive to those gods though. It has amazing stats for the early laning phase with procs, health, CDR and HP 5. The only thing this item doesn't do for you is help you clear the lane, but other than that, it's a perfect item for most ability based solo laners right now, and will help out your damage to backliners a lot in the late game in 10.6. To keep in theme with the Season of Tanks, next up is the support role, where not too much has changed, but the nerfs to auras and overall procs has shifted support builds a little bit. First up is Gauntlet of Thieves, which has decidedly won the war with Prophetic Cloak to be the go-to first item for supports. Prior to this patch, you could argue for either one, and they both had upsides and downsides, but since it's much harder to reach the 600 protections requirement for Prophetic Cloak, I think you should now always be going Thieves in your first slot as support. It comes online so much faster and allows you to make more active plays around the map, especially for those early beacons. You'll be so much more tanky than a support going Prophetic in all cases except the hyper late game, and I think Thieves is now just the go-to. Next up is Stone of Binding, which to be honest could have been in this section, the solo section, or the jungle section. This item is insanely good right now due to the nerfs to backliner protections. Flat pen, or flat proc reduction in this case, becomes way more useful the less protections your target has, and the inverse for percent pen of course. This makes binding increase yours and most importantly your teammates' damage to squishies substantially. Again, solo laners love this item too, and even some junglers can make good use of it in a bruiser build or as a single tank item in a full damage build, but I'll drop it in the support section to leave room in those for others for more specific items. And finally we have Sentinel's Embrace. Yes, this item took a nerf in 10.6, but since all backline protection auras took a hit, it becomes even more important to build this item so your backliners aren't just getting deleted by dives. This still gives 30 procs to a single backliner and 20 procs to 2 of them, which will massively help in keeping your damage dealers alive in fights. This more than negates the entire effect of Stone of Binding and is still the go-to starter option for supports in 10.6. Plus, it has the best tier 1 in my opinion for the early game, maybe tied with Warflag, but that has way worse upgrades. Next up, the role that everyone was screaming is dead in 10.6 but seems to be doing just fine, mid. First up, I have a very spicy one which I think is being severely underrated in the new patch, and that's Ethereal Staff. This item's passive effect got buffed in 10.6 from 6% max health steal to 8%, and with the nerf to power across the board, having on-hit effects that can boost your damage is more useful than ever in the mid lane. Not only does this item do 8% max health damage, it also grants you that health. Even against a squishy with around 2200 HP late game, you're stealing almost 200 for yourself. Against a tank with close to 3500 HP, you're at almost 300 health stolen. This can stack 3 times, so if we take an average of about 250 health stolen per hit, you're gaining a massive 750 HP, which combined with the 150 from the item itself and the 20% CCR on the item, you become way more tanky than you think just by buying this one item. Sure, it does hurt your damage a little bit, but I think it's more than worth it on a lot of mages in this patch, as well as solo lane guardians, where this item is a must build in my opinion. Next up for mid though, we have Soul Reaver, which is good for a similar reason to E-Staff really. Damage proc items became better this patch due to raw power getting nerfed, and while Reaver's effect was nerfed a little bit against squishy targets, it's as strong as ever against tanks and was arguably buffed in that regard, since tanks are more threatening and some junglers are going bruiser, so you get even more value from an item that was already great last patch. I mean, it's Soul Reaver, it basically always has been good no matter the meta, and it still is in 10.6. And finally we have Charon's Coin. The percent pen on this item was buffed back to 20% in this patch, alongside percent pen becoming generally more useful for the reasons I just mentioned. Plus, with raw power being nerfed down, the focus on utility stats like regen and movement speed that Coin has become more useful than just the raw power and pen of Obsidian Shard. On mages, Coin should be your go-to for percent pen in your mid builds right now. Moving into the jungle though, first up is Jotun's Wrath, which has always been a solid first item option for most ability-based junglers if you don't need Brawler's Beat Sticks anti-heal. However, its better glyph option even got buffed in 10.6 to provide CDR every other ability instead of every third ability, which makes this item and its glyph even more desirable. Plus, flat pen got a little bit better due to backline aura nerfs, which helps out Jotun's as well. Still a solid item in 10.6. Serrated Edge is next up, which is just a giant stat pile in a patch where stats were nerfed across the board. This item shines above the rest to provide some of the most overall stats on any assassin item in the game. Power, lifesteal, percent pen, movement speed, and more power and lifesteal on the passive. There's not much this item doesn't do, and it's good on both ability and auto attack junglers, so you pretty much can't go wrong with Serrated on any assassin in the new patch. And finally for jungle, I wanted to mention Bumba's Dagger. Going into Protector of the Jungle has sort of been the default starter option for a long time, but I think in this new patch, Bumba's Dagger and its upgrades actually make a lot of sense. Protector's percent power and protection increase is less valuable now because all power and protections were nerfed, so you're increasing a smaller initial pool of stats. And I think both upgrades for Bumbas are good depending on your god. If you can use Bumba's Hammer well through AA cancelling for example, on Thor or Thanatos, then grab that. If not, just get Spear, as it simply provides a big stat bomb and that huge heal on killing camps and objectives. Eye is still viable, don't get me wrong, and probably still better on gods that can use that 35% attack speed really well, like a Kali, Bakar or Ao Kuang, but I think Bumbas has some real potential in the jungle for this patch. And finally, last but not least, we have the ADC role. First up is Devourer's Gauntlets, which seem to have decidedly won the early game lifesteal slot over Assy and Bloodforge. Yes, it requires stacking, and so an Assy rush will outtrade it for a few minutes while you get it stacked up, but once stacked, it can provide way more benefit than Assy. Specifically that 15 flat penetration, which is amazing for winning 1v1 trades in lane since hunters don't have many procs without support auras around. And even in late game teamfights, flat pen applies after percent pen, and so after all your crazy percent pen options apply, you still reduce the enemy procs by a further 15. Devos also just has solid lifesteal and power all the time once stacked and doesn't rely on a passive trigger like Assy does. Next up is Kin Size, which if you've been following the ADC meta even a little bit since the crit nerfs, you'll know that Kin shred builds with double or triple percent pen are the meta right now. 10.6 just swung the pendulum even further in Kin's favour, since tanks are stronger and some junglers are going bruiser, so you get even more ridiculous value from Kin Size max health damage. This item is insane right now and is being built straight after your Devos or Assy in most games. And finally we have Odysseus Bow. I will quickly mention that the 3% pen options of Executioner, Dominance and Titan's Bane are all insane right now, but I went with Oboe for the list. While not looking so great on paper, this item not only increases your overall DPS to a single target with the effect, but also spreads to nearby enemies, giving you a tiny bit of AoE. With the insanely high attack speed and pen you're building in shred builds, the damage from Oboe is no joke and absolutely worth building right now. But that's all I've got for 3 items for every role that you should definitely be building in the new patch. Quick shout out again to my Nexus creator link where you can get cheap gems and support the channel, link in the description. But other than that, I'll catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.